I'm always cautious because I feel like agent is being thrown around a lot amongst AI companies. Whereas, if you're summarizing one document and comparing it to the other, that's not necessarily an agent. An agent to me is actually downstream, connecting into systems, taking actions, understanding input and going down different pathways to actually trigger automated actions. And that to me is more agentic.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Rajeev Dham. Rajeev is a partner at Sapphire Ventures, a 20-plus-year-old venture capital firm that focuses on investments in business-to-business software companies. Rajeev has invested for roughly a decade and a half, focused on companies in horizontal and vertical artificial intelligence, as well as leading innovators in FinTech and healthcare. Some of his notable investments include Glean, Square, Moveworks, and Monday.com. Rajeev, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Yeah, great to be here, Peter. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure. Well, let's begin with the venture capital firm that you help lead. Talk a bit about Sapphire Ventures and some of the points of differentiation you would call out regarding your firm.
Yeah, no, happy to. Sapphire, here at Sapphire, we're really focused on backing founders that are building companies of consequence. So to us, what that means these are category defining B2B and enterprise AI and software companies globally that are leading their category or reinventing their category and can endure for many years to come. We typically invest at that early growth to kind of growth stage. So when a company has product market fit, but hopefully isn't too late, and at the pre-IPO stage, so sort of in that early growth sort of stage is where we come in. And we invest in companies of consequence, and I think that's evidenced with the outcomes that we've been able to achieve. So over a third of our exits or outcomes have been companies that have gone public. So as you said, companies like Monday.com or Braze, or even companies of the past like MuleSoft and Square and Looker and many, many others over the years that are leading their categories in software.
Yeah, very, very impressive track record to say the least. Some of the areas that you focus on, as I mentioned, artificial intelligence, FinTech, healthcare, among other areas in which you focus. Talk a bit about how you defined the lane that you cover.
Yeah, so actually at Sapphire, we believe that hyper focus and hyper specialization is the recipe to success. I think there's a lot of companies raising technologies impacting markets globally. We kind of choose our lane, and even within this B2B and enterprise AI lane, we subspecialize internally as a firm. We have folks that focus just purely on infrastructure software, and even within infrastructure software, cybersecurity, for example. And then we have folks that focus on application middleware to sort of application software, and within that, many areas that we focus on as well. And that's where I sort of sit, and I really help to drive and lead a lot of our application layer and AI application investing, which of course right now it's an incredible time to be investing because it feels like most of the activities there. And I naturally gravitated towards that. I think as most folks do early in their career, they make their first few investments in B2B financial technology or healthcare or horizontal software, and then it compounds from there.
Yeah, fascinating. And AI is a fast-moving subject, to say the least, with advances happening daily, it seems. And given the time horizon of your bets, how do you think about making an investment today in a value proposition as described by investors today, given those shifts, the fact that the narrative may need to be very different, the necessity for nimbleness and pivoting may be required? How do you think about that when you're making an investment for an outcome that is quite a number of years in the future?
Yeah, I mean, Peter, our job is to make an investment today in something that will hopefully materialize 5 years, oftentimes 7 years out into the future. So it's partly looking at what the entrepreneur has built in the company, and it's partly trying to predict where they can go. But I would say the number one sort of area of focus for us as it relates to that is the founder. And I would say relative to even when I was investing in 2012 to 2018, the focus on the founder, the archetype of the founder has changed, and we can talk about that, but how much we weight the founder CEO in those investment decisions, because we know that business will need to be incredibly agile, may need to pivot, will need to add product, will need to leverage the latest that's happening in the underlying foundation model and that technology. Just the speed of competition is higher, and therefore it's a different archetype of founder, and we overrate that. And we actually weight a little bit less what they've done today because we know that's going to evolve so much. We just want to make sure that they've done something that we could wrap our heads around that we feel like is impressive to date.
Well, let's double click on that. I would love
Yeah.
to understand how that has changed over time, as you suggest.
Yeah, I think in SaaS 1.0 or 2.0, when you had sort of on-prem moving to cloud, it was there were the founders and CEOs were incredible, and they were focused more on commercialization and go to market. Certainly, many of them had a product sense, but once you got up and running, you got to maybe even 50 of ARR, certainly 100 of ARR. It felt like in that era you had reached some level of escape velocity, particularly if you exited before 2021, right? I think in this new era, we're seeing founders that are highly technical, highly product oriented. They know the latest and greatest that's going on with all the models and as such. They are more first principles thinkers, right? They're throwing out the playbooks that worked for the 2015 or 2017 SaaS company that's doing the next iteration of something that's done before. This is a brand new technology, a brand new way to think about designing your product and the human and digital sort of interaction. And so everything is done sort of grounds up. And so when I'm talking to a founder, I'm actually looking to evaluate, are they relying on some old playbooks, or are they hiring people? Are the way they're designing their organization, the way they're thinking about their product innovation, is it completely new? Which makes it hard for me to diligence because I can't use my same playbooks and pattern recognition necessarily as well. But that is very not just refreshing, but I think that's critical. These first principles, highly creative, fast moving sort of founders that are building in today's era, those are the ones that we're seeing are the most successful.
Very, very interesting indeed. I appreciate you sharing that. I'd be interested in learning more, if I could, Rajeev, about how you're advising portfolio companies as demand increases for AI agents. This is, as we talk about the evolution of AI, and certainly you've been an investor for multiple waves of this, all of it, if anything, multiplying tremendously in recent years with the advent of generative artificial intelligence, the continuation to agentic AI, the ever present off into the future, but a future that seems nearer with AGI coming forward. Talk a bit about kind of where we stand now, especially when it comes to agentic AI from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, listen, I think every company, I always say at board meetings and companies generally, you're either AI have or AI have not. And honestly, corporate and enterprise buyers, both horizontal amongst Fortune 500 companies to SMB within verticals, they're looking for that. And now you need to be solving a real and critical customer pain point. You can't be a technology that's chasing sort of a problem or customer value. Everything needs to come together. But if you're in the have-not bucket, it's going to be really hard to grow at outsized rates and raise capital and get the valuation that you sort of think you deserve. And so I always look at companies and make sure there's a very strong AI have story, because that bifurcation really exists both in metrics and valuation, as we discussed. And so the advice is very strong around that area, but you don't want to do it just for the sake of doing it. And I think you need to build AI into your product in a really authentic sort of fashion. I will say the agentification is interesting. I think it is still early in terms of its true traction of truly agentic systems within the enterprise example. And I'm always cautious because I feel like agent is being thrown around a lot amongst AI companies. Whereas, if you're summarizing one document and comparing it to the other and alerting something for some anomalies and detecting that, that's not necessarily an agent. Or if you're searching something and doing Q&A, that's not an agent. An agent to me is actually downstream, connecting into systems, taking actions, being self-healing, not having to create any rules, understanding input and going down different pathways to actually trigger automated actions. And that to me is more agentic. And that's still early in the enterprise, but it's something that, we're always on the lookout with new founders. And particularly, again, how authentically they talk about their technology and where they want to take it.
And how far are we getting in terms of the real use cases associated with how you just described agentic AI? If the shorthand I've been using, Rajeev, has been, if generative AI is essentially the equivalent of like junior members of a team doing analysis, it won't all be correct. It doesn't reflect a great amount of experience. One needs to
Yeah.
look over its figurative shoulder. Agentic AI has the promise of actually making decisions that maybe a senior
Yeah.
person would have made. And so the necessity for the technology to be that much better needs to be there, presumably. How are things advancing from your perspective to be able to deliver on that promise?
Yeah, I think that's one way to look at it, Peter. I think the other way to look at it is agentic AI should be able to actually do the work, right? In software 1.0 or 2.0 over the last 10, 15 years, companies were making knowledge workers 10 or 20% more productive. The promise of not just AI, meaning summarization and generating content, the promise of agentic AI is you're actually going to do the work and make that person 50% or even 150% more productive, right? By doing the work yourself. And so we are starting to see early use cases of this. I mean, customer support's a great use case where you're not just handling the language, but you are actually taking action in providing a refund to the customer or updating underlying systems, right, en masse. And that's kind of very interesting, and that's showing a lot of results. And so that's just one of many examples, but it is early in the enterprise, but that's something we have an eye on. We think the opportunity is going to be massive for these agents. I would say go to market, Peter, is another one. I have a company that actually has a full-fledged agent where if someone comes to your website and is showing interest in your product, it sort of will start to interact with you. It will know all the context with which you're coming to the website, what you're doing, what you're interested in. It's integrated with the underlying CRM in order to do that, in addition to understanding your interaction data. And then it's booking you a meeting. It's sending you an actual email follow-up that it sort of generates. And so it's taking this action and taking it down to the final step, which is a booked meeting in this case. And then maybe after that, you have a voice AI agent that gets on top and actually talks to you and sells you in that meeting. That's probably the next step. But so we are starting to see some of these agent platforms really come to fruition.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And you alluded to something that I would also love to double click on. The nature of software, how it's produced, who produces it is changing tremendously in light of AI, leading to a lot of productivity advancements, certainly, as you note. But talk a bit about, the how you see this changing the nature of how technology is developed and where you believe this is going. Obviously, it has profound impacts on major enterprise IT organizations. Would be interested in some of your reflections from that perspective.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, like you're exactly right. I mean, we talked about AI customer support. AI in development is probably the biggest market, even bigger than customer support. We see that with Cursor, we see that with Windsurf, and then you have citizen developers from teenagers to folks that are just learning to code, or frankly, business folks using Lovable and Bolt and Replit to build WYSIWYG applications, kind of similar to the no-code app building. We're seeing this happen in the enterprise. I would say it is supercharging some of your top developers by 10, 20, 30%. It also creates a lot of sprawl and headache. If you think about all these people that don't really know how to write code that are using this front-end AI to write code, maybe not in the most ideal way, that could also create some headache. But this is the way of the future. I think what's interesting is it's just going to supercharge. I mean, you have to take a stance. I'm a abundance, age of abundance, and AI sort of optimist that I think you're just going to be able to do more with AI versus it's going to completely disrupt and there's never going to be a developer. And then the second thing I'll say, Peter, is while AI can help you write that code and develop that product faster from a competitive moat perspective, which VCs love to talk about, you still got to figure out what you want to build, right? You still got to have that end taste and design, which I think there's more focus on ever right now, which is how do you design your product? How intuitive is it? What is the UI and UX? You got to know what that is to build and lead that person into the future. The building of it and writing coding of it, all of my companies are on Windsurf or Cursor internally, right? So you're right, you should be able to do it that much faster, but the product decisions, the creativity, the artistic sort of nature of building products and reimagining interactions and even new hardware and surface areas, how we interact with digital surface areas, like that's all sort of new and changing. And I think that's going to become even more critical than just figuring out who can write the best and fastest code.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Really interesting perspective there. Rajeev, I'd be curious, in a related vein, if you were to advise someone who's like about to start college on the subjects that will most important over the next generation, what would you suggest? And again, how has that changed in recent years based upon, for example, some of the things you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's a great segue. Obviously, Peter. I mean, that's I think about this. I have two young kids. They have some time to go, but one, I think anything to do with expression and communication, I think is critical. I mean, AI can now unleash a level of power and be our muse in a way. And so we need to learn how to communicate. And a lot of it is in natural language, right? How to communicate to get the most out of it. And so communication, expression, artistic endeavors, right? Design, I think all of that's critical because it is going to unleash this a wave of creativity across all countries globally, this technology. So I think that's super critical. I think anything to do with entrepreneurship. I think you're going to see a lot of people with AI be able to build their own businesses or their side hustles, make something out of themselves. And that's great, right? Because you have so much power in your hands, tenfold or 100-fold that you got from the internet 20 years ago or 25 years ago. And so I think that's also going to be critical for folks to learn. I still think mathematics is critical because there's an underpinning to understand. And I still feel like mathematics does give you structure and understand how life sort of operates, but more and more is going to be on creative and language because that's the language of AI. It's not math. Math was underpinning sort of coding, right? And so yeah, that's what I would say.
Great insights all.
Yeah.
Not only do you focus on AI, but historically you focused on SaaS business. And I would really love your reflections. There's been a fair number of pontificators that have talked about the advances in AI fundamentally changing the opportunity for SaaS providers and the necessity for some of them to really make some rather large changes. I wonder, can you talk a bit about how you see SaaS business models changing as a result of continued advancements in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's interesting. We the VC and the broader tech community, I think, went through waves, and we're probably still in inning one on this AI thing. I think 2-3 years ago, everyone felt like, well, gosh, the incumbents have all the data, right? The large software providers have all the data and have all the know-how and have all the customers, so they could just wrap AI on top, and it'll all be solved. Actually, what we're seeing is quite the opposite. The AI native companies, or even the smaller startups, call it the 50 million or 100 million ARR startups, they're actually the ones that can be the most nimble, again, in reimagining how their product should work and how they can leverage this technology to actually benefit customers. So I'm seeing most of those companies do the best in this era versus the old software company. But I do disagree when people say SaaS is dead. Now it's all about AI. I understand it's a little bit cheeky in some ways. I mean, they're both one and the same. You have AI companies that are software companies, right? AI is just an underlying technology that you leverage and you embed it across your experience. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing. In terms of business model impact, I think the most popular one is the pricing models being changed. As I said, if you're going from making a knowledge worker 10 to 20% more productive to potentially doing the work itself, maybe you can charge to do the work. I invested in a legal AI company, and they sit alongside a core system, a practice management system, and they are, however, almost doing the work of the paralegal, right? And so the deal sizes that they're able to command are actually more than the underlying system of record, which is unheard of. Usually the system of record in any particular category owns the largest ACVs or the largest sort of revenue per customer, and everything else is just a sideshow. Here you have AI companies that are the system of action or doing something agentic on top or producing an actual output that are producing sometimes even more, right? A higher sort of price point than the underlying system of record, which then leads the obvious question: does that relegate finally the systems of records to be potentially less impactful, to have less staying power, where all the value will be created on top, which is the age-old question we go through with every wave, but now it really feels real in terms of what customers are paying for these systems of actions and insights on top.
Yeah, very interesting and fascinating to see how that continues to evolve. I'd be interested. Are there? We mentioned at the top. I did in the introduction. You have further through the course of the conversation talked about the companies you're most excited about. As you reflect upon the major enterprise chief information officers, for example, what are some other examples of companies you think would be interesting for them to get to know?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking that, Peter. I mean, there's almost so many. I would say the sheer number of companies we're seeing that are growing fast and exhibiting incredible metrics with incredible founders and having customer impact is massive. But we talked a little bit about Glean at the outset, just an incredible business that's trying to bring ChatGPT to the enterprise in a highly secure fashion, with all the right enterprise integrations in the enterprise context and know-how, and also bringing a fully sort of agentic, out of the box, pre-configured agent workflows that can go downstream and complete a number of tasks for knowledge workers. I would say that's a very interesting company. Trying to think of other companies. There's other companies not in the portfolio, but I'm trying to think of some others. I would say, going back to customer support, there's businesses like, a Sierra or a Decagon that are massively accelerating, taking resolution rates and containment rates for 20 to 30% up to 70 to 80%. I mean, the impact that you can have, while, by the way, still maintaining CSAT, the old school sort of automated chatbots, so to speak, which were really rules-based, were actually had deteriorated CSAT, even though they had higher containment rates. This is actually working, right? And these are actually really big and interesting businesses as well.
Yeah. Do you have a thought on how far we are from artificial general intelligence by chance, Rajeev? As somebody who's immersed in these topics and thinks about continued advancement, where are we?
Oh man, I don't. There's so many opposing views on this, Peter. I wouldn't even have a hot take here. I would not have a hot take here.
Got it. Well, I want to also ask you, as somebody who clearly needs to remain very informed on the business landscape, on shifts in the tectonic plates from a technology perspective, who do you read? Who do you listen to? What are some books, podcasts that you would recommend to others to stay as informed as you are?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of VC and investing podcasts that are out there that I think are interesting, from Invest Like the Best or Acquired, or Capital Allocators, for sure. I think there's no shortage, though, of information on AI sort of broadly. Honestly, just reading the earnings announcements for some of the big companies and seeing how they're thinking about capital expenditure and build out from the Microsoft and Google, and keeping track of their announcements. I think those businesses are doing an incredible job of releasing, Gemini, for example. Their advances that they make are just incredible. I would say more recently, even the Mary Meeker and the Bond Capital, the 350 slide report on trends in AI that came out. I mean, that was just an incredible read to remind everyone how quick the adoption of AI has been globally on a consumer basis, and how aggressive, again, the CapEx build out is on the enterprise basis, that we all now hope and feel, and I think are more optimistic about having these production use cases that we've been talking about that are going to match up to that CapEx spend here over the next 2 to 3 years.
As somebody who invests in enterprise technology, no doubt, directly and indirectly, you've got insights into what differentiates major enterprises' ability to leverage these technologies effectively and build and cobble together an ecosystem that is effective for them to continue to make advances themselves. And any insights you would share as to some of the differentiating factors you've seen or heard of among those organizations that are the best adopters of the kinds of technologies we've been talking about?
The companies need to be willing to not necessarily cannibalize themselves, but almost undergo process and change management to a large degree. If you're really going to adopt the most powerful AI solutions, your business could look fundamentally different. The roles of individuals, the titles of individuals, how you allocate what everyone does. And that's why, by the way, you're also seeing the best-in-class enterprise AI companies, take the Palantir approach of having these forward deployed engineers, because they're realizing you need to bring some of these enterprises, even the most sophisticated leading edge ones from a technology perspective, you need to bring them along with the journey and explore their organizations, explore where is AI going to fit in and how. Right? These aren't out of the box solutions just yet. Some of them can work, sure, but to get them really to fly within the enterprise and be adopted and sticky and impactful, you got to actually have, on the vendor side, individuals that go in and work with some of the largest enterprises in the world. And then the counterpart to that is these enterprises need to be willing and open to having that change management, and not thinking that they're just going to adopt a SaaS AI platform that's going to suddenly work and provide 50% more productivity. So there is a little bit of a lift and a mindset change from the last generation of SaaS companies. Now that will get easier over time with AI companies, you'll need less of these forward deployed engineers. It'll become more better understood where they're going to fit in with the organization and more accepted in terms of a new way to do things.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, Rajeev Dham, thank you so much for taking time with me today. Fascinating to learn more from you based upon the areas of investigation and investments that you've been making. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it, man. Take care.